The catch, the drive, the Music City Miracle, the Fail Mary. These are some of the most significant and talked about moments in NFL history. But what about the moments people don't talk about, or at least don't talk about enough? In this video, I'm going to list off what I believe to be the most underrated moments in NFL history. Now, there are going to be times where the word underrated doesn't exactly apply, and a word like forgotten may be more appropriate, but you get the idea. I also want to mention that I'm not ranking these moments in any special order. So with that, let's jump into the video. Alright, our first underrated moment is Randy Moss almost catching that pass at the end of Super Bowl 42. Now, this is the Super Bowl in 2007 when the Patriots were 18-0 and they were going for 19-0 and they nearly had it, but Plaxico Burress shattered their dreams in the final minute. Now, a lot of people think the game ended there. They forget the Patriots actually got the ball back with 3 timeouts remaining. But nothing was really open down the middle of the field, so the Patriots had to resort to throwing these Hail Marys, one after the other. But one of them was damn near close to being completed. Tom Brady stepped up and somehow chucked the ball 70 yards, and he nearly connected with Randy Moss, but it got broken up at the last second. But man, oh man, had he caught that pass, I have total faith in the Patriots kicker at the time, Stephen Gostkowski, to drill that field goal and send the game to overtime. And who knows what would have happened from there? Maybe the Patriots pulled off, and they would officially eclipse the 72 Dolphins, and Mercury Morris could finally shut the hell up. But anyway, this is definitely a very underrated moment if you ask me. Randy Moss almost catching that pass at the end of Super Bowl 42. Our next underrated moment is Doug Bryan missing those kicks against the Steelers in the 2004 playoffs. Now, Doug Bryan was the kicker for the New York Jets in 2004, and the Jets had a pretty good squad this year. Chad Pennington was their quarterback, they had Curtis Martin, they had Santana Moss, Herm Edwards was their coach, and they nearly knocked off that 15-1 Steelers team in Heinz Field, but their kicker Doug Bryan missed 2 kicks in the final 2 minutes, and the second kick was just awful, and the Steelers ended up winning in overtime 20-17. Now, for some reason, this is not in the discussion with the all-time great kicking gaffes in NFL history. For example, the Bills kicker in the Super Bowl, Blair Walsh in 2015 against the Seahawks, and Billy Cundiff against the Patriots in the 2011 AFC title game. For whatever reason, this whole Doug Bryan thing just flies under the radar, and I don't know why that is. It's not a minor thing. Like, it wasn't a regular season game or even a wild card game. This is the divisional round of the playoffs. Had he made one of those kicks, the Jets would have gone to the AFC title game. So because of that, I'm going to list this here as an underrated moment in NFL history. Our next underrated moment is 4th and 26. Now, I know a lot of you out there are going to say, wait a minute, that's not underrated, that's very well known. Well, the reason I'm going to classify this as underrated is because when I did a YouTube search of 4th and 26, none of the videos even came close to cracking 1 million views. And this did happen 17 years ago, which is pushing 20 years. That of course means there are a lot of people watching this who weren't even alive back then. So because of all of that, I'm going to classify this as an underrated moment. But anyway, let's talk about what happened. It was the 2003 divisional round of the playoffs. The Eagles were hosting the Packers, and the Eagles found themselves in a do-or-die situation on 4th and 26. Everyone thought this game was over. If you were a Packers fan, you were booking plane tickets to the NFC title game. But for whatever reason, the Packers did the unthinkable and ran a cover 2 defense on 4th and 26, and this allowed Donovan McNabb to connect with Freddie Mitchell over the middle to just pick up the first down and keep the Eagles season alive. This completely took the wind out of the Packers' sail, and the Eagles would go on to win the game, making the play that much more epic. And from that moment on, that play was forever known as 4th and 26. This is definitely still talked about a lot in Philadelphia, and probably even in Green Bay. But around the rest of the NFL world, I don't think the phrase 4th and 26 is something the average fan would pick up on. So because of that, I'm going to say this is an underrated moment. Our next underrated moment is the missed roughing the passer call on Aaron Rodgers at the end of the 2009 wildcard game between the Packers and the Cardinals. Now, this is the forgotten Packers-Cardinals playoff game because it's since been overshadowed by the 2015 double Hail Mary game. But this 2009 game was a total classic, so let's set the stage. It's 45-45 in overtime. The Packers have the ball deep in their own territory. Aaron Rodgers ends up throwing a pick 6, and the Cardinals win the game 51-45. But what gets overlooked is that Aaron Rodgers got mauled on this play. As you see, the guy is ripping at his face mask, and the ref is standing right there, so I don't know how he missed it. But that should have been roughing the passer in 15 yards for the Packers. This was just a total screw job because it was so blatant, and because the Packers ended up winning the Super Bowl as a wildcard team the following year. So who knows, maybe they would have had another Super Bowl run in 2009. But anyway, I definitely consider this a forgotten moment in NFL history. Okay, up next we have the Seahawks 2-point conversion in the 2014 NFC title game versus the Packers. If you'll recall, the Packers were leading the Seahawks 19-7 with just 3 minutes left in the game, but the Seahawks would beat the odds and come back to win in overtime 28-22. Now this game is definitely not underrated. In fact, it's one of the more memorable conference title games of the last decade. But what is often overlooked is the 2-point conversion that put Seattle up 22-19. So let's have a look. Russell Wilson takes the snap, rolls right, and then it all goes south from there, and it looks like it's going to be a complete disaster of a play. But somehow he does a cross-body throw from nearly the 20-yard line, and it lands right in the hands of his tight end Luke Wilson. Absolutely remarkable play. Not to mention, Russell Wilson was pretty much hit as he threw the football. And what makes this play so significant is it put the Seahawks up by a field goal, because the Packers would go down the field and kick a field goal to send the game to overtime. So if that crazy 2-pointer didn't happen, Seattle loses this game. And one last thing before we move on, I pulled off a very similar play in NFL 2K5 a while back, so I'm going to put that on the screen as we move on to the next moment. Our next underrated moment is the 2001 Browns-Bears Miracle Comeback game. Now if you're a Browns fan, you've probably erased this from your memory because it's so traumatic, but if you're a Bears fan, you probably have a good laugh about this every now and then. But what happened was, the Browns were up 21-7 with 32 seconds left. Everyone, and I mean everyone, thought this game was over, but I'm sure you can imagine what happens next. The Bears score a garbage touchdown to make it 21-14. Then they recover the onside kick, and then they convert on the Hail Mary. Unbelievable. And then in overtime, they went on another weird play. It was a tip ball that wound up being a pick six. So the Bears won 27-21. Just incredible. Like, this is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. And here's a challenge to all the viewers out there. Name a more ridiculous comeback than this. I know a lot of people will point to the Patriots-Falcons Super Bowl, but the Patriots had a ton of time left. The Bears only had 32 seconds to pull this off. So name another comeback that was in a similar time frame to this. Up next, we have the Redskins fail play from 2009. This occurred on Monday Night Football against the Giants, and it was quite a doozy. But before I go over this play, let's fast forward to 2015 so I can show you a play that you'll definitely remember. Remember this one? The Colts were hosting the Patriots on Sunday Night Football, and they ran this ridiculous play. Their entire team shifted to the right side of the field, and the only people left were the center and the guy taking the snap. It's really an embarrassment that this play ever happened, and it's often been called the worst play of all time. Now, for some reason, not many people are aware that the same thing happened to the Redskins back in 2009, and that takes us back to where we were. As you see, the Redskins shift to the left side of the field. The only people left are the center, the holder, the kicker, and another guy, but then even the kicker is motioned to the left. And for some unexplainable reason, the ball is snapped, and the holder is left with no choice but to throw up a prayer, and it wound up getting picked off. Absolutely embarrassing. And what's worse about this play is the Giants player actually had a good run back. Like, he made it to around midfield, and had he made another move or two, he could have taken it to the house. So in a lot of ways, this is worse than the Colts play from 2015, but this one just never gets talked about, so that's why I'm going to list this as one of the more underrated moments in NFL history. Our next underrated moment is Dennis Northcutts' forgotten drop in the playoffs. So most people, especially Browns and Steelers fans, are aware of Dennis Northcutts' infamous drop in the 2002 playoffs because it would have sent the Browns to the next round. But most people aren't aware that there was a sequel to this. In the 2007 divisional round versus the Patriots, the Jaguars were trailing 21-14 late in the third quarter. They really needed to score a touchdown to keep pace, and they nearly did just that. However, on 3rd and 11, Dennis Northcutt was not able to hold on to a touchdown over the middle, and the pass fell incomplete. Tough to watch if you're a Jags fan. I mean, he had it right there, but maybe he was afraid to take a big hit, I don't know. But who knows what would have happened the rest of the game had he just caught that pass. Now, this definitely isn't as significant as his drop against the Steelers because that was way later in the game, but this Jaguars drop is certainly a big moment in their franchise's history. I did a Google search and saw that there were actually articles written about this drop, so it was definitely a big deal, and that's why I consider this an underrated or forgotten moment in NFL history. Wrapping up here, we have 2 more moments left to cover, and these are definitely going to fall under the forgotten category rather than underrated, because they're pretty minor events in the big picture, but still things I wanted to talk about. So up next, we're going to talk about Marcuslstons' blunder in the 2013 playoffs against the Seahawks. What happened here is the Saints were trailing 23-8 with 30 seconds left in the game. They score a touchdown to make it a 1-score game, and then they actually recover the onside kick to put themselves in position to at least have a chance to tie the game.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
But what happens next is Drew Brees connects with Marcuslston down the sideline on a pretty sizable gain, but instead of going out of bounds to stop the clock, Colston inexplicably throws the ball forward. Very, very bizarre. I have no idea what he was trying to accomplish. Like, even if it was a design play, why the hell is he throwing it forward? A terrible way to end your team's season. But luckily for Marcuslston, this has pretty much been forgotten by most football fans. I personally think this is in the ballpark of the butt fumble and the Fail Mary, but everyone else seems to disagree. So until it's more well known to the general public, this will go down as a forgotten moment in NFL history. And our last underrated moment, and again this is going to fall under the forgotten category, is Jeff Reed's 65-yard field goal attempt versus the Broncos in 2007. Now I admit, this is pretty obscure, but I'm including it because it was a very good look from 65 yards. In fact, it was just a yard or so short. I mean, look where the guy catches the ball. Had there just been a slight breeze behind him, Jeff Reed would currently hold the record for the longest field goal in NFL history. Now the record at that time was 63 yards, and it was set by Tom Dempsey back in 1970, and it would later be tied by Jason Elam in 1998. But at this time, the record had stood for 30 plus years, and every 60 plus yard attempt I had seen until Jeff Reed's just wasn't very good. Like, I remember Shane Graham had one in 2006 that was awful, and even my boy Phil Dawson had one that just wasn't very good. And what's weird about this one is Jeff Reed got zero credit for it. The announcers doing the game didn't say a single thing about it. They just acted like it was any other missed field goal. They didn't acknowledge how close he was to NFL history. So it's about time somebody gives Jeff Reed credit for this, and I'm going to do it right here, right now. And that's going to wrap up my list of the most underrated moments in NFL history. If you're not already aware, this is a re-upload of a video I made back in March. The original version really needed to be refined, so I thought I'd go back and remaster it. There were some errors with facts, and some of the underrated moments I selected were pretty lame looking back. But anyway, give me your thoughts on my list and let me know what else I should have included here, because it's very possible I'll make a part 2 someday. Anyway, that's going to wrap up the video. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, and please consider supporting me on Patreon. Until next time, I'm Ramen Robbie, and thanks for watching.